This is the all-new 2026 Mazda CX-5. It's longer, the interior is nicer, and there's tech from this decade, but no turbo. Today we find out if Mazda's made a mistake or if they've just stopped making cars for the comments section. I'm your host, Brian Makse, and on this channel you get reviews for drivers from drivers. Let's start where you expect, under the hood. 187 horsepower and 3,800 pounds. On paper, that sounds like surrender. In real life, that's Mazda saying, we're done negotiating with the internet. No spool, no mood swings, just torque that shows up right on time like it's paying rent. It's a direct conversation, not a conference call. No turbo lag, no, hey, I was talking. No, hey, sorry, my Wi-Fi's bad. You ask, the engine delivers. At part throttle, like we're cruising here, this engine is genuinely quiet, not quiet for a four-cylinder, actually quiet. Mazda claims that the new smaller EGR cooler improves transient throttle response. That's when you're cruising along like we are here and then decide to lean into the throttle, and throttle response is instantaneous. And normally when we talk about terminology like that, I'd say that's engineer speak for we changed something, except in this case your foot actually confirms it. Mazda rewrote the shift logic for the transmission in this 2026 CX-5, and it shows. It holds on to gears longer on trailing throttle as you carry through a corner, and it's pretty clear that this was calibrated on back roads, and I wouldn't be surprised if this CX-5 was calibrated on this road. Plus, downshifts happen naturally as they should on deceleration without you having to reach for the downshift paddle. The best thing is it's not a CVT, but it's not a dual clutch, and it's certainly not pretending to be one either. It's a 6-speed automatic that respects momentum. There's one drivetrain party trick here, and what they do is they preload the torque coupling for the all-wheel drive system. What it does is preload the torque before you actually turn the wheel. The fine print says one thing, my hands say another. It doesn't just wait and see. You turn in, and it's like the chassis is already mid-sentence, and what that means is that the CX-5 doesn't let those front tires drag all 3,800 pounds around. It's subtle, like Mazda likes to do with GVC Plus and KPC on the MX-5, but what it means to you as the driver is that it gives you much more confidence behind the wheel, especially when the corners are interesting or even when you're in low grip situations. The 0 to 60 time is around 9.5 seconds. The internet is going to have a meltdown. The car doesn't care, and neither will you after about 15 minutes behind the wheel. Subscribers get notified when new episodes drop on this channel. Non-subscribers hope the algorithm will show it to them eventually, and if you want to see when new episodes are published on this channel, well, that's what the subscribe button does. Dave Coleman said MX-5 tuning. In a 3,800-pound crossover, that sounds like something the PR team wrote at 9:47 p.m. the night before the vehicle launch. Then you drive it, and fortunately for the press release, the steering backs up Coleman's claim. There's actual weight buildup through a corner. It turns in progressively, and it comes back to center perfectly. And right on brand, it doesn't just point the nose, it points the nose and gives you a little bit of communication as to what's going on at those two front contact patches. That preloaded all-wheel drive torque coupling gives you a real sense from behind the wheel that all four wheels are participating in the cornering and the accelerating, which is very much unlike everything else in the category. Brakes are excellent. They're strong. There's great initial bite. They're not too grabby, and pedal feel is fantastic as well. You can truly modulate this pedal and control the attitude of this CX-5 on corner entry as if it were an MX-5. CX-5. And even ABS intervention is subtle, not panicked. And for drivers like us, that's a good thing because it doesn't go into full-on corporate liability protection mode when you start driving this CX-5 like you mean it. Given how I can control the attitude of this CX-5 on corner entry, it definitely tells me it was tuned by a human, not a committee, and clearly Mazda has some good humans doing all of their chassis tuning. The extra 4.5 inches of length should have killed handling here, but it didn't. Body roll's present, it's not eliminated, but it's well managed. It's a crossover, so of course it leans, but it leans at a controlled rate that tells you exactly what the chassis is doing, kind of like an MX-5. Mid-corner bumps don't unsettle the chassis, which is a rare thing in this category. The dampers just take the initial hit and then the chassis settles. And over bigger bumps, there's the occasional secondary bounce, but there's no wallowing recovery like you expect of a crossover of this size. The extra length in the wheelbase specifically does help by smoothing out the ride. In that way, it's a much less jarring experience than the old CX-5, which had a bit of a reputation for transmitting road impacts into your spine. It's a massive difference from the old CX-5, and a lot of people did complain about ride quality in the previous CX-5. I still enjoyed it, but this is much smoother. Mazda hasn't gone soft. There's still some firmness in the way they've calibrated the suspension to remind you that this is still a driver's crossover. And on a long drive like I've done today, that means arriving fresh with a smile on your face instead of arriving annoyed. On rough secondary roads at speed, the suspension composure makes this feel one segment more expensive than its price tag. The damping quality punches way above its sticker price. One of the first things I noticed when I got behind the wheel is that this body structure is much stiffer than the previous CX-5, and that's a good thing because it gives a better foundation for the suspension to do its work. If you want to support the channel beyond just watching, well, the merch store is open, and your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this and less time worrying about manufacturer blacklists. No pressure, just an option. The seating position here is perfect. It's got a reasonable hip point, and it seems like you sit a little bit lower here than you do in other crossovers. There's plenty of adjustment in the steering column, lots of adjustment in this seat. I think just about anybody can find a comfortable and effective seating position in this new CX-5. Love the shape and the size of the steering wheel. Should expect that from Mazda, but it absolutely works perfectly here. Encourages you to have your hands at 9 and 3, and the new airbag cover design is aesthetically pleasing and very premium. Visibility is excellent. Tall glass all around, large outboard mirrors, and then when it comes to parking, well, with this top trim, there are cameras all around, so it makes it very easy to park this. I've spent a lot of time driving this, much more than I normally would for a new vehicle launch like this, and I have to say I'm very happy with the driver's seat. It's comfortable, it's supportive. This is top trim, so it's heated and cooled as well, but it is very comfortable. I'm able to sit behind the wheel for long stints without any complaint, and there's just enough bolstering to the seat to hold you in place when the corners get interesting. This big screen with Google built in is the obvious headline, and it's a major shift from Mazda, that's for sure. However, as I've come to learn, it is very effective for a bunch of reasons. Of course, everybody's talking about how Mazda moved the climate controls onto the screen, and there should be some physical controls, but the fact of the matter is, with Google built in, you can control the climate controls with your voice. Thankfully, the menus are shallow, and it's not a 3-screen odyssey anytime you want to change a setting. Plus, by the time these get into customers' hands, Google's Gemini will be part of the system, and that's going to add a whole layer of coolness and effectiveness. Obviously, with this being longer and slightly wider than the previous model, there's much more interior volume. Storage up front and space up front is excellent, but I think the real interior volume story is what's going on in the second row as well as under the hatch. Space in the second row is up massively. It is now much easier to put child seats in there, and there is a tremendous amount of knee room. I'm more than comfortable in that second row with the driver's seat in my seating position. There's just a tremendous amount of space, but if you have kids, baby seats going in here, no problem at all. These rear doors open almost 90 degrees. So if you're buying this for your family, you're going to be very pleased about how that second row works. Under the hatch, there's much more cargo carrying capacity than before. And if you need to carry larger items, it's a breeze to drop that second row. And effectively, you've got a flat floor for all kinds of large items to go inside your CX-5. On the steering wheel, yes, we've got these touch-based controls, and they look haptic, but they have actual feedback. You can change music tracks or the drive mode without having to look down at the steering wheel, and that's practical accessibility, not luxury, and that is important because this is, after all, a driver's crossover. The like button tells YouTube to share this episode with more people like you who may be interested in the Mazda CX-5, and if this episode gave you more insight than a brochure or a press release, well, that's the entire ask. I asked, and 400 of you voted. The comments read like, "Hi there, please recreate my commute trauma." So we did. Bad pavement, steering feel, button loss, and the big one, does it still feel like a Mazda? The number one concern by a mile, 43% of you, was ride comfort on bad pavement. Several of you flagged the outgoing CX-5's tendency to ride roughly over certain surfaces. I sought out the roughest road I could find, which is a tough task in California, and good news, that rough ride, it's gone. The longer wheelbase and revised damping have fixed it. Bumps happen once and resolve. There's no secondary oscillation. Maybe there's some secondary body movement from time to time, but that's it. Certainly no hobby horsing. If that's what kept you out of a CX-5, you definitely need to look at this one. Number two was steering and brake feel, and a lot of you got specific. You wanted to know if it communicates surface changes through the wheel. It does. You wanted to know how the weight builds through corners. It builds progressively, not all at once. Someone asked if it compares to a Germanic Uber wagon. Well, it's lighter in the hand than a BMW X1, but more talkative than a Tiguan. That's a good neighborhood, I think. Now, the question I got more than any other across every single post, the infotainment. You're worried about losing physical buttons, and you're right to ask because Mazda did move climate controls to the screen. But here's what matters. The screen is fast, the menus are shallow, and climate is one tap from the home screen or zero tap if you use voice commands. Is it better than some dedicated knobs and switches? No. Is it the disaster you're expecting? Also no. It's very livable. And here's what I think. With native Google, and by the time these get into customer hands, Gemini will also be there. This is all cutting edge and a game changer. And finally, the emotional question. A lot of you asked some version of the same thing. Does it still feel like a Mazda? Is the zoom still there? Or did they sand it off to chase the CR-V? After a few days driving it, it's still there. It's quieter, more refined, and yeah, it doesn't have the turbo shove anymore. But the way it turns into a corner, the way the chassis communicates, the way it makes you want to take the long way home, that's still intact. For 2026, they grew up the CX-5 without lobotomizing it. And thanks to all 400 of you that voted, because that's better research than most press kits. We'll keep doing this, so keep them coming. Watch the community tab, same deal. If you want a drag racer, buy something else. If you want a luxury car that handles like a hatch, this is it, even without the turbo. Did Mazda ruin it by killing the turbo? The spec sheet says yes. The stopwatch says yes. The comment section is already typing. But the chassis says, drive me first. This is the anti-spec sheet CX-5, the one that's slower on the internet and faster in your brain. Dave Coleman's team built a crossover that communicates through the steering, settles over bumps with genuine composure, and rotates into corners like it forgot it weighs 3,800 pounds. The turbo made the old car fast in a straight line. This chassis makes the new car fast everywhere else. That's not a downgrade, that's a philosophical shift. If you're cross-shopping on a spreadsheet, Horsepower per dollar, 0 to 60 per cylinder. Well, buy the CR-V hybrid. It'll win every category. But if you've ever taken the long way home because the road was good, well, Mazda built this CX-5 just for you. It's for the crossover driver who understands that how a vehicle moves matters more than how it goes in a straight line. Mazda bet this all-new CX-5 on that customer still existing. And after driving the CX-5, I think Mazda's right. In a lot of ways, the competition isn't the CR-V or a RAV4. It's the Mazda 3 that buyers owned before they needed more space. This CX-5 remembers what that car felt like. Mazda's the only mainstream brand building crossovers for people who still enjoy driving. And in 2026, that's either brave or suicidal. And either way, this CX-5 deserves your attention. That's the 2026 Mazda CX-5. Subscribe if you enjoyed this. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree. And the merch store is open if you want to support more of these. See you on the next one.